Marcus Daniels couldn't breathe. His eyes bulged in disbelief as a white flight attendant's fingers dug into his throat right there in the middle of first class. His finely tailored navy suit crumpled as he gasped for air. Around him, passengers froze, unsure if they were witnessing a scene from a movie or a real-life horror unfolding mid-air. A phone camera clicked. "Let go of him," someone finally shouted. But Heather Richardson didn't. Her grip tightened. This wasn't turbulence. This was a premeditated racist assault at 35,000 feet. And Marcus Daniels wasn't just any passenger. He was a black CEO, Harvard MBA, and founder of a billion-dollar tech company on his way to close a $100 million international deal. Yet in that moment, all that power and prestige vanished. He was just another black man being attacked, while others decided if he was worth defending. The most terrifying part. Heather's scream, "He's attacking me!" That single sentence flipped the narrative. Several passengers looked confused. A few reached for phones. Others moved toward Marcus as if he was the threat. And within minutes, the entire flight would descend into chaos. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Marcus Daniels adjusted the gold tie pin his mother had given him on the day he opened his first office. He sat in seat 2A, surrounded by soft leather-polished brass and the hush of first-class rituals. His laptop glowed dimly as he reviewed the global tech pitch for what felt like the 100th time. The words blurred not from anxiety, but from years of learned vigilance, the habit of staying alert, even in spaces meant for rest. The flight to San Francisco was supposed to be routine. A high-stakes presentation, yes, but for Marcus, that was normal. Since founding Horizon Technologies, he had closed 9-figure deals in cities around the world. What still wasn't routine, even after all the awards, press features, and speaking engagements, was the feeling of not truly belonging. He noticed it in the way Heather Richardson, the lead flight attendant, had greeted him with mechanical coldness. Other first-class passengers had received warm smiles, casual jokes. Marcus A. gnawed nothing more. Subtle but deliberate. As Heather passed through the cabin offering pre-departure beverages, Marcus smiled politely and said, "Sparkling water with lime, please." She didn't look at him, just kept walking. He waited. The man in 2C, an older white gentleman in a gray polo, received his scotch on the rocks within seconds. The woman across the aisle got her Chardonnay. Marcus watched as Heather moved past him again without acknowledgement. 5 minutes passed, then 10. He pressed the call button. Heather returned eventually, her expression unreadable. "Yes, I requested sparkling water with lime a few minutes ago," he said, calmly, professionally. Heather's lips pursed. "We're preparing for departure. You'll have to wait until we're in the air." She reached up and switched off the call light, brushing past him with enough force to nudge his shoulder. He didn't respond. He simply nodded and folded his hands in his lap. This wasn't new. He'd experienced the same treatment at 5-star hotels, where they assumed he was a driver, at investor dinners, where someone handed him their car keys, thinking he was valet. Every time he swallowed it down, telling himself to focus on the long game. But something about this moment, how brazen it was, how unprovoked, hit differently. Across the aisle, a businesswoman with a pearl necklace met his eyes for half a second, then looked away. The man in 2C glanced up from his tablet, but said nothing. Passive spectators. The norm. Marcus leaned back. "Don't react," he told himself. "Not here. Not now." The plane began taxiing. The engines rumbled. As the seatbelt sign dinged on, Marcus closed his laptop and exhaled slowly. He told himself this was just one flight, one person, one moment. But the sting wouldn't fade. After reaching cruising altitude, Heather returned to the aisle with the drink cart. She moved gracefully between seats, smiling at passengers serving them in order. Marcus waited again. Maybe now she reached his row 2A and once more passed him without a glance, offering a refill to the man in 2C instead. Marcus raised his hand. "Excuse me," he said. Heather's expression hardened. "I said you'll have to wait. But you're still serving others, Marcus replied, gesturing toward the man who'd just received his second drink. Heather's voice grew sharp. If you're going to be difficult, I can inform the captain. Several heads turned. Marcus froze. He could feel the air shift in the cabin. Passengers, now whispering phones, subtly pointed in his direction. Difficult. Heather leaned in her voice, barely above a whisper. You people always think the world owes you something. Marcus blinked. His jaw clenched. His heart pounded. He said nothing. I don't appreciate your tone, she added louder. You're making this uncomfortable for everyone. The woman in 2B straightened in her seat, but stayed silent. The man in 2C shook his head and muttered, unbelievable, though whether in defense or disapproval wasn't clear. Marcus turned back toward the window, pressing his fingers to his temple. His throat tightened, not from anger, but restraint. He had been here before. At the investor gala in Chicago, when a waiter tried to escort him out before realizing he was the keynote. At the airport lounge in Paris, where they asked for a second form of ID. At his own tech conference, where security questioned his badge while letting others walk by unchecked. It was always a different face, a different excuse. But the humiliation felt the same. He didn't demand. He didn't escalate. He endured. Because dignity when you're black in elite spaces is often a quiet war. Jason, a younger flight attendant with short dark hair and a nervous demeanor, finally approached. Sir, I can get your drink if you'd like, he offered gently. Marcus nodded. Thank you. Jason returned minutes later with a glass of sparkling water. As he leaned to place it on the tray table, Heather intercepted him. I'll handle it, she said. Snatching the glass from his hand, she slammed it down in front of Marcus, splashing water across his laptop keyboard. Oh, I'm sorry, she said flatly. Turbulence. There was no turbulence. A few passengers gasped. Others looked down, pretending not to see. Marcus slowly reached for a napkin, blotting the water from his laptop with trembling fingers. His voice didn't rise. But inside, something cracked. And then came the twist. From 2 rows back, a woman raised her phone above her head. Her voice rang clear. I've been recording since boarding, and I think everyone needs to see how this man has been treated. The cabin went still. Heather's eyes widened. The game had changed. Marcus wasn't alone anymore. Heather's smirk faltered. The voice from behind, young, steady, resolute, cut through the cabin like a siren. Amara Williams, barely 30, with an afro wrapped in a silk scarf and camera in hand, stood half-raised in her seat, holding her phone like a shield of truth. I've been filming since the drink service started, she repeated. Every second of it. Marcus looked back, slowly locking eyes with her. He didn't nod. He didn't speak. But the gratitude in his expression was unmistakable. In a space designed to suppress and erase his dignity, someone had chosen to bear witness. Heather turned red. Recording other passengers is against airline policy, she barked. Amara smiled slightly. Not when it's documenting discrimination. There's no expectation of privacy in public transportation. Federal court precedent. Several passengers glanced at her. Some impressed, others unnerved. Patricia, the lead flight attendant, appeared at the front of the cabin, radio in hand. Heather a word, she said stiffly, beckoning her to the galley. Heather gave Marcus one last withering glare before walking away. But the damage had been done, and the evidence was now irrefutable. Jason, the young male attendant who had attempted to intervene earlier, hovered awkwardly nearby. I'm sorry about all this, he whispered, looking at Marcus with concern. Marcus gave a single nod. Not your fault. But inside, something had shifted. For years, he had endured microaggressions with surgical restraint. At networking events, on corporate boards, even at award ceremonies where people assumed he was security until he took the mic. Marcus never raised his voice, never lashed out. He believed in control, in strategy, in timing. And this time, his timing was perfect. While Heather was still in the galley, Marcus tapped into the encrypted folder on his phone labeled Osiris. It wasn't a corporate file. It was a personal initiative, a hybrid AI analytics system he'd built in secret with Horizon's engineers to document bias in customer service interactions. Its beta test phase had included thousands of audio and video samples from airports, hotels, restaurants, and yes, airlines. Marcus had trained it on voice-tone response delay physical behavior and escalation patterns, and today it had been recording from the moment he boarded. He opened the dashboard. Flagged interaction count 7. Audio spikes 4. Tone inconsistency detected. Service disparity compared to neighboring seats. Confirmed with one tap. All of it synced to his personal cloud and Horizon's legal team. Heather thought she was dealing with a high-maintenance passenger. What she didn't realize was that Marcus Daniels wasn't just a CEO. He was a systems architect, a man who had built entire platforms used by law enforcement cybersecurity agencies and Fortune 100s to detect unethical behavior. The tools that had quietly protected others were now turned inward to protect him. From the galley, voices rose. Patricia's was muffled but angry, Heather's defensive frantic. Marcus didn't need to hear the words. He recognized the pattern denial deflection and ultimately panic. He opened a secure group thread titled Redline, Exec Alert, and began typing Incident on board Sky America Flight 2187. Targeted passenger mistreatment, physical aggression, passive escalation by crew. Video and system data secured. Request standby legal review. Within seconds, 3 dots appeared. Then came the replies. Diana Washington, Chief Legal Officer Monitoring. Upload received. Standby. Tariq Johnson, Chief of Staff pulling cabin crew histories. You okay? Ava Liao, VP of Operations. JetGuard AI flagged same sequence 9 minutes ago. Cross-referencing airline policies. Marcus didn't smile, but he did feel something settle in his chest control. He wasn't alone in this fight. His entire infrastructure, built through years of sweat scrutiny and sacrifice, was activating like a well-trained immune system. And it was all legal, all trackable, all time-stamped. He turned his head slightly and caught Amara watching him. She gave a subtle nod, as if to say, "I got your back." He didn't know her name yet, but her voice had started something. At the front of the plane, Patricia returned to the cabin. Her smile was tight like a fraying rope. "Mr. Daniels, I understand there have been some misunderstandings this morning. We'd like to offer you a complimentary drink and meal of your choice as a courtesy." Marcus studied her face. Her tone was softer now, but the condescension still hung behind her words. "Courtesy," he repeated, "not accountability." She flinched, and that's when Jason stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said firmly, "may I speak freely?" Patricia hesitated. "Go ahead." "I've been on this crew for 3 months," Jason said. "I've seen Heather speak rudely to passengers before. I should have reported it sooner. But today was different. She crossed a line, and everyone here knows it." Murmurs filled the cabin. Marcus locked eyes with Patricia. "Your crew created the situation. My team will handle the resolution." She opened her mouth, but then came the twist. The intercom crackled. A new voice spoke. "This is Captain Jenkins. Due to an onboard incident involving potential physical aggression, we are making an unscheduled landing in Charlotte. Please remain seated." Gasps erupted. Heather stormed from the galley, eyes wide. You told him, she screamed at Patricia. But Patricia said nothing. The silence told Marcus everything. The plane was going down not from turbulence, but from truth finally being acknowledged. As the intercom went silent, the shockwave from Captain Jenkins' voice spread through the cabin like wildfire. An unscheduled landing, because of a confrontation. Because of her. Heather's breath hitched eyes darting across the aisle as if searching for something solid to cling to. But the power dynamic had flipped, and she felt it. Patricia, the lead attendant, remained stone-faced, but even she couldn't hide the tremor in her voice as she spoke again. "Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. We'll be landing shortly. We apologize for the inconvenience." The tone was professional. The tension was electric. Passengers complied, but murmurs rippled through the rows. Phones buzzed. Screens glowed. Some were texting. Others were live streaming. The moment was no longer contained. It was bleeding into the digital world where it couldn't be erased. Marcus remained still. His throat ached from earlier. He hadn't spoken since activating the Red Line protocol, but his silence wasn't submission. It was precision. Every second that passed tightened the noose around the rot, hiding beneath Sky America's glossy surface. Because this wasn't just about Heather. She was a symptom. The disease was the system that empowered her. Marcus reopened the Osiris app and began cross-referencing crew records. He tapped Heather's profile. Her record displayed a sanitized list. Strong performer, assertive with passengers, quick decision-maker. But a deeper layer revealed the truth. 6 complaints in the last 14 months. All dismissed. Patterns emerged. Each complaint came from passengers of color. 3 involved verbal escalation over basic service. 2 involved passive aggression that resulted in passenger reassignment to coach. D. 1 had been submitted by a black executive from a Fortune 500 company who never received a follow-up. None of the incidents had been flagged as serious. The internal system had buried them. Marcus swiped left and opened Patricia's log. Even worse. Though considered a veteran crew leader, Patricia had 0 official infractions, yet over 24 informal flags instances where crew members described her as enabling dismissive of bias reports and hostile to DEI training. One note chilled Marcus to the bone. When challenged, she reminds staff that complaints are a waste of ink unless they make it to corporate PR. It was the kind of culture you couldn't fix with a seminar. It required demolition. As the plane began its descent, Jason returned to Marcus's row, kneeling beside his seat discreetly. "I just got word," he whispered. Legal from HQ is already on standby at the Charlotte terminal. They're calling it a Tier 3 response. That means PR, legal, and security are all activated. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Jason hesitated. "Sir, this isn't the first time something like this happened, but it's the first time someone like you was involved." The words stung with honesty. They both understood the meaning. Most passengers in Marcus's position, black, accomplished, powerful, knew how to keep quiet. They absorbed the disrespect, smiled through it, walked off the plane, and filed complaints that disappeared into HR silence. But Marcus, he brought systems, witnesses, receipts, and now leverage. From behind, the elderly woman in 2B leaned forward, whispering, "If this helps, I'll give my statement. I saw the entire thing. I should have spoken sooner. I'm sorry." Marcus turned slightly. "Thank you," he rasped. She nodded, eyes misting with guilt. Then came the most unexpected shift yet. Carol Alvarez, the managing partner from Clearwater Ventures, stood up. "Excuse me," she announced, turning toward the cabin. Half the passengers looked up. "I don't speak out often on flights," she began, "but I have a responsibility. My firm invests in multiple transportation technologies. What I witnessed on this flight was discrimination, pure and simple." Heather stared in disbelief. Carol continued, "I'll be filing a full statement, and I'll be reevaluating our partnership with Sky America moving forward." Marcus looked down, jaw tight. Not from anger, from realization. The rot in the system wasn't hidden anymore. It was exposed, and now capital, the one language these corporations truly understood, was speaking up. Then came the twist. As the plane dropped into final descent, a new notification appeared on Marcus's phone. New file uploaded to Horizon Legal cabin crew internal Slack messages. Leaked thread. Marcus tapped it open and froze. It was a screenshot, an internal crew group chat. Heather's name was highlighted. She had typed just minutes before boarding another medallion passenger today. "Gonna be one of those flights. Don't worry, I'll keep him humble." Another reply from Patricia. "Just don't end up on TikTok. Keep it tight." Marcus stared at the screen, then slowly turned it to Amara. She read it, her eyebrows rising. "They were planning this," she whispered. The plane touched down, tires screeching, cabin lurching forward. But inside Marcus Daniels, everything just went still. Because this wasn't personal anymore. This was coordinated misconduct at a corporate level. And now he had them. The moment the plane's wheels touched the tarmac in Charlotte, a collective breath was released across the cabin, like pressure from a shaken bottle finally easing. But in seat 2A, Marcus Daniels remained silent. His laptop lay closed, his Osiris system still active, his throat still tender, his mission now clear. He wasn't here just to reclaim his dignity. He was here to ignite accountability. Outside, emergency vehicles waited, flashing lights blinking against the dawn. Inside, truth hovered in the air, thick and undeniable. Patricia approached her professionalism, now brittle under pressure. We ask that all passengers remain seated until the authorities board the aircraft. Thank you for your cooperation. No one responded. No one clapped. The cabin had gone quiet, but not from fear, from anticipation. Then something remarkable happened. The elderly woman in 2B slowly stood. She had remained quiet most of the flight, her gaze cast downward, while injustice unfolded beside her. Now her voice quivered, but didn't break. I want to say something before anyone walks in here pretending this didn't happen, she began. I watched a man ask for a drink. That's all. I watched him wait. I watched him be ignored. And I watched the crew treat him as if his presence in this cabin was a mistake. She turned toward Marcus. I should have spoken up sooner. I didn't. And I was wrong. Marcus gave her a small, gracious nod, the kind that said, "You're late, but you're here." Her confession seemed to unlock something in the room. The businessman across the aisle, white early 50s, raised his hand. I saw the whole thing too, he said. Heather skipped his seat, twice, then escalated without cause. Patricia's jaw clenched. Sir, but he held up a phone. And I filmed it. Don't worry, it's already backed up. I know how these things get lost. Heather, still seated near the front, looked away. Another voice joined in, this time from row 4. I'm Professor Michael Chen, Constitutional Law at Berkeley. I witnessed the interaction and can testify under oath that Mr. Daniels remained calm throughout. A woman near the exit stood next. Dr. Helen Ross, pediatrician. The crew's behavior was alarming. I noticed the tone shift the moment he spoke. It was racial, plain, and simple. Amara stood, camera still rolling. You all heard me earlier. I don't need to repeat myself, but let me say this, if no one else had recorded what happened, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the seats. Eyes turned to Heather, but she sat frozen, red blotches climbing her neck. Patricia tried again. Please, everyone remain seated. The captain will explain. He doesn't need to, said the voice from the cockpit door. All heads turned. Captain Jenkins emerged, a tall, broad-shouldered man with steel-gray temples and a lined face that had seen more skies than conflict. I've read the crew logs, he said firmly. I've reviewed the incident alerts, and I've watched the security feed. A hush fell. His eyes met Marcus's. Mr. Daniels, you've been mistreated. I want you to know that before any uniform steps onto this aircraft, I acknowledge it. I don't speak for the company, but I speak for myself. Marcus nodded, his voice hoarse but steady. Thank you, Captain. Then Jenkins faced the rest of the cabin. For those of you who spoke up, it matters. In my 20 years of flying, I've seen too many passengers pretend not to see. Today, I saw something different. He turned toward Heather and Patricia, and I've seen enough. Gasps echoed as the twist dropped. By order of this flight's command, Jenkins said, Flight Attendant Heather Richardson is hereby relieved of duty pending formal investigation. Patricia, you're to return to the cockpit and remain off communications. Heather's mouth opened, stunned. You can't. Yes, I can, Jenkins replied. Federal regulations give me full authority during emergencies. And this, he gestured toward the rows of witnesses and glowing camera phones, is an emergency of trust. Security officers entered the cabin from the forward door. No one stopped them. Heather didn't resist. She knew the cameras were rolling, knew the damage had already taken root. As she was escorted down the aisle, someone near the rear clapped once, then another. Soon the entire cabin was applauding not out of joy, but out of release. Applause not for vengeance, but for validation. Marcus remained seated, hands folded. He wasn't interested in the applause. He was focused on what came next. This wasn't the end of the flight. It was the beginning of reckoning. Marcus Daniels stepped off Flight 2187 with the quiet posture of a man who'd spent his entire life balancing poise and pain. The air on the jetway felt denser than normal. Too many eyes, too much tension. The emergency landing at Charlotte had sent a ripple through airport security customer service and public relations. But Marcus wasn't thinking about the chaos they would have to manage. He was thinking about what he would build from the ashes. A medic met him immediately, inspecting the bruises at his throat. "We'll need to evaluate this at the ER," the technician said. "Possible soft tissue trauma, maybe a bruised trachea?" Marcus nodded but didn't speak. His vocal cords still ached. He wasn't interested in talking. He was already working. His phone buzzed continuously. Horizon's legal counsel, Diana Washington, had already mobilized a rapid response team. His chief of staff, Tariq Johnson, was en route. PR, HR, and risk management executives from his company were locked in a secure Zoom briefing. They weren't waiting to react. They were already documenting everything. In a private conference room provided by airport authorities, Marcus opened his encrypted laptop. Osiris had finished syncing. The cabin audio, video, and behavior heat map were all archived. Osiris Summary Report. Incident 21A. The dashboard read, DAM. Total duration, 42 minutes. Escalation trigger. Selective service denial. Affected individual. Marcus Daniels. Crew bias. Risk index, 93%. Recommendation escalation to external counsel and regulatory oversight. He exhaled. That number, 93%, was damning. Not emotional. Not anecdotal. Data. The kind of data that would make corporate insurers panic and general counsels scramble. Minutes later, Diana Washington's face appeared on his screen. Calm, sharp-eyed, and already 2 steps ahead. "Marcus, you okay?" she asked. He nodded once. "Good," she said, already pivoting. "We've pulled Heather Richardson's employment file. Her last 3 evaluations flagged abrasive conduct and difficulty accepting policy reminders. There are 4 prior passenger complaints, all closed without follow-up." And Patricia Worse Diana replied, "She's been in 2 arbitration hearings internally, one involving a Muslim passenger claiming profiling during security procedures, another involving a flight attendant who resigned citing racial hostility. Neither case escalated externally." Marcus clenched his jaw. "This is cultural," he rasped. "Exactly," Diana said. "It's not about 2 employees. It's about a structure built to silence complaints until they reach legal threat level." She paused. "We've got something else. What one of the passengers from your flight, Dr. Raymond Wilson, has already written a medical affidavit about your condition and behavior during the incident. He's willing to testify." And Amara Williams. Her live stream hit over 3.2 million views in the last hour. Marcus blinked. That fast? "She's trending. Justice for Marcus is picking up steam. You're already a national headline." He leaned back, staring at the ceiling tiles. "I never asked for this." "I know," Diana replied, "but we are here. And we're not wasting it," Amara texted shortly after. "Several passengers want to speak with you directly. I've got names and contact info. Also, I have screenshots of internal crew chat logs someone leaked. It's bad." He opened the screenshots. His heart dropped. One message from Heather dated 2 days ago. "Tired of these DEI hires thinking they run the world. Watch me humble this next one." Another from Patricia. "As long as there's no video, we're good. Don't worry." Marcus stared at the screen. They weren't just reckless. They were confident they'd get away with it. "Until now," he replied. "Get me a secure line with Jason, the male attendant. I want to know what else he saw." 10 minutes later, Jason's nervous face filled the screen. He looked exhausted but determined. "I'll tell you everything," he said. "I've only been working here 4 months. But I've seen Heather target black passengers before. She brags about it. Says she's testing entitlement levels. So Patricia knows too. She's covered for her more than once. Why are you coming forward now? Marcus asked. Jason swallowed. Because I saw you stand there and take it. Calm. Quiet. And I saw how quickly they tried to turn it on you. If they'll do it to someone like you who has power, what happens to people who don't? Marcus let that land. He felt a strange, bitter respect for this young man. Not because he was brave, but because he was honest enough to admit how long he had stayed silent. He disconnected the call, then opened a blank folder titled Flight 2187, Witness Dossier. By the end of the hour, he had uploaded 7 video recordings from fellow passengers, 2 sworn affidavits, 1 internal crew chat log, full Osiris analytics, screen captures of social media virality metrics, medical observations from Dr. Wilson, all time-stamped, all admissible. Then came the twist. Diana called back. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "What?" "We just got a call from Sky America's legal team. They're offering an immediate settlement. No amount specified yet, but they're already requesting a non-disclosure clause." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "They think this is about money, they're scared," she said, "but not scared enough." Marcus sat forward. "Then let's give them something to be terrified of." Marcus Daniels didn't pace. He didn't rant. He didn't yell. That wasn't his way. Instead, he moved like a general preparing for battle, calm, collected, and 5 steps ahead. The offer from Sky America's legal team came as no surprise. A vague promise of financial compensation in exchange for silence, a carefully worded apology, a non-disclosure agreement to bury the story forever. But Marcus had no intention of being buried. Not this time. He turned to Diana Washington on the video call. "We don't respond yet. Not until I speak. And not until we set the agenda." Diana nodded. "Understood. You want to go public?" Marcus looked down at the bruising on his throat in the mirror across from him. "No," he said. "I want to go strategic." By nightfall, a temporary command center had been set up in a secured suite at the Ritz-Carlton, Charlotte. Tariq Johnson, his chief of staff, stood at the whiteboard, mapping out a network of influence media contacts. Civil rights organizations, airline regulators, tech partners, and political figures who owed Marcus favors, or at least respected his reputation. "This isn't just about Sky America," Marcus explained. "This is about every airline, every hotel, every boardroom where people like me are tolerated, but never fully welcomed. This is about building pressure where they can't escape." Diana added, "We can target 3 fronts simultaneously: legal, reputational, and regulatory." Marcus leaned over the table, voice hoarse but commanding. "Exactly. We apply pressure without making noise. Let them panic. Let them leak the story, trying to control the narrative." Step 1. Documentation distribution. Amara, now embedded as an unofficial media liaison, uploaded her footage to a secure database and issued digital credentials to 3 major networks under embargo. CNN, MSNBC, and The Guardian each received a time-locked link footage, plus corroborating testimony from other passengers. The content wouldn't go live until Marcus gave the word. Step 2. Legal posturing. Diana's team sent a formal letter to Sky America's counsel, not to negotiate, but to notify. It included a timeline of the incident preliminary witness statements and an excerpt of the internal crew chat logs. It ended with one simple line: "We are currently evaluating whether this incident constitutes an isolated personnel failure or a systemic pattern of corporate negligence. No threats, no demands, just a signal. We know more than you think." Step 3. Corporate disruption. Tariq contacted board members at Global Tech, the firm Marcus had originally planned to pitch in San Francisco. He explained the situation briefly, clarified the meeting delay, and emphasized that Horizon Technologies was still prepared for partnership. Their response was unanimous: "Take the time you need." Then a twist: Global Tech offered more than understanding. Thomas Wilson, the Global Tech CEO, sent a private message: "This story needs to be heard. If you go public, we'll stand behind you, personally and professionally." Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. Support from a corporate titan, not charity, not pity, Just someone finally willing to follow instead of lead. He turned to Tariq. Start building the coalition. Quietly. I want a cross-industry pledge from at least 10 major firms supporting anti-bias reform in air travel and transportation. We'll call it what Tariq asked. Marcus paused. Equal skies. Diana smiled. Has a legacy ring to it. They filed the trademark before midnight. By the next morning, Equal Skies had a logo, a charter, and a temporary website. The homepage read, "We believe no one should fear being targeted at 35,000 feet for the color of their skin." It ends here. It also included a contact form for travelers to submit similar stories. Within 12 hours, over 4,000 messages poured in. From doctors, from students, from elderly Black veterans, every industry, every income level. The pattern was clear. Marcus didn't just represent himself anymore. He was becoming a conduit for collective rage and reform. Then came the twist. Jason, the young flight attendant, sent a message through an encrypted channel. "There's something you need to see." "I've pulled video from 2 prior flights Heather worked. I had to dig into archived logs. Same pattern, same behavior. And guess what? In one, Patricia covers for her directly on comms. Attached was a transcript. Patricia, just ignore him. He's just another medallion whining for perks. Heather. Should I serve him last again? Patricia, you do what you have to do. Just don't get caught. Marcus leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. This wasn't just crew misconduct. This was tacit company policy, a culture of microaggression cloaked in plausible deniability, reinforced by silence. Diana stared at the transcript. With this, they're finished. No, Marcus replied. They're just beginning to understand who they're dealing with. At precisely 10:00 a.m. the next morning, Marcus Daniels joined a secured video conference with Sky America's executive legal team. The meeting had been requested late the previous night, framed as a gesture of transparency and goodwill. What the airline expected was a bruised man seeking restitution. What they got was a strategist holding an arsenal of evidence allies and public momentum. Marcus sat at the head of the conference table, inside the Ritz-Carlton suite, a silk scarf wrapped loosely around his bruised throat. On either side of him sat Diana Washington and Tariq Johnson. Behind them, the freshly printed charter of the Equal Skies Initiative was pinned to the back wall, visible on camera, though no one said a word about it. On the screen, Sky America's Executive Vice President of Legal Affairs, Alan Brewster, offered a warm corporate smile. Mr. Daniels, first let me reiterate our deepest apologies for the unfortunate incident aboard Flight 2187. We take matters of customer experience very seriously. Marcus didn't speak. Diana did. Mr. Daniels will reserve his remarks for the moment. Please continue. Brewster nodded, clearly uncomfortable with the shift in power. Our internal investigation is ongoing. In the meantime, we're prepared to offer a formal written apology, a full refund of your flight, and a confidential settlement package. Marcus tapped the table twice, prompting Tariq to slide forward a folder. Diana opened it. Before we discuss your offer, we'd like to present some findings of our own. She pushed the folder into the frame of the camera. Its title was simple, Incident Chronology Flight 2187, Systemic Patterns of Discriminatory Behavior. What is this? Brewster asked. Diana smiled faintly. A summary, with attachments. She proceeded to explain. 7 passenger videos corroborating timeline and abuse. 4 witness statements. 2 from doctors, 1 from a law professor, 1 from an airline elite status member. Osiris behavior mapping showing irregularities in service timing. Internal crew messages recovered from archived servers showcasing deliberate mistreatment and managerial approval. And then the dagger 2 additional videos from prior flights, Diana said. Patterns consistent with Heather Richardson's conduct. Patricia's voice confirms cover-ups. All time-stamped. All admissible. Brewster blinked. Where did you? We built the very system your airline contracted to monitor in-flight service bias. Marcus finally said, his voice low but steady. You forgot who designed your firewall. I didn't. There was silence. Then Brewster recovered. "Mr. Daniels, surely we can resolve this privately. The media's been relentless already." "Continuing down this path helps no one." Marcus leaned forward. "Helped no one?" he asked. "I was nearly strangled on your aircraft. Recorded. Watched. Disbelieved until the evidence was irrefutable. That's your version of help," Brewster coughed lightly. "Look. Marcus, may I call you Marcus now?" Diana continued. "We aren't here to negotiate a check. We're here to offer a path forward. One that involves accountability, not optics." Brewster nodded slowly, his tone shifting. "What do you propose?" Tariq clicked the remote. A slide deck appeared on screen revealing the Equal Skies Demands 1, a public acknowledgement of systemic bias within Sky America's operations. 2. A formal apology issued by the CEO, not just legal. 3. Full implementation of anti-bias and de-escalation training monitored by third-party firms. 4. Reinstatement review of past racial discrimination complaints. 5. Partnership with the Equal Skies Initiative, including financial support policy access and shared metrics. 6. Immediate termination of Heather Richardson and Patricia Green with transparency on disciplinary action. 7. A commitment to tie executive bonuses to verified equity metrics for customer service over a 24-month audit period. Brewster's expression hardened. "These are aggressive. They're necessary," Marcus said. Then he added, "And they're non-negotiable." Brewster shifted in his chair. "You're asking us to admit institutional racism." Marcus didn't flinch. "You're asking me to pretend it didn't exist." More silence. Then came the twist. A new window opened on the conference screen. Someone had joined the call. Richard Blackwell, CEO of Sky America. Gray-haired, immaculately dressed with a voice like polished marble. "Mr. Daniels," he said calmly, "I'd like to speak with you directly." Diana opened her mouth, but Marcus raised a hand. "Go ahead," he rasped. Blackwell folded his hands. "I've reviewed everything. And I'll be honest, my instinct was to protect the company first, to keep things quiet. But that instinct, that's part of the problem." He looked into the camera. "I'm not here to fight you, Mr. Daniels. I'm here to ask what it will take to make this right." Marcus stared at him for a long moment. "Let's start," he said slowly, by not calling it an incident. Blackwell nodded. "Fair. I was assaulted. And you run the system that enabled it." Another pause. "Then let's begin with the truth," Blackwell said. "We'll meet your demands. All of them. But I have a request." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "When this is over," Blackwell said, "help me fix what I couldn't see." Marcus leaned back. Now the fight wasn't just personal. It was institutional. And Sky America had just surrendered to rebuild on his terms. When Richard Blackwell, CEO of Sky America, uttered the words, "We'll meet your demands," something fundamental cracked, not just inside that video conference, but across the entire airline industry. For decades, the system had functioned like clockwork. Discrimination was deflected, complaints dismissed as misunderstandings, and payouts quietly settled behind airtight NDAs. But now, under the weight of irrefutable evidence, public scrutiny, and a man who refused to be bought, the system began to collapse in real time. Within hours, the shockwave started. The first fracture came from within. Jason, the junior flight attendant who had quietly supported Marcus during the flight, submitted a sworn declaration detailing multiple incidents where crew members, including Heather and Patricia, had targeted passengers of color. He included flight numbers, dates, and approximate passenger names. But he didn't stop there. He went public. In a short video uploaded to his personal account, Jason said, "I stayed silent too long. I saw passengers humiliated for no reason other than their skin color. I was scared to lose my job. But watching Marcus Daniels stay calm while they tried to erase his dignity, that changed me." The video exploded, retweeted by influencers, civil rights groups, and several celebrities. Within 24 hours, it hit 5 million views. The second collapse came from the company itself. Sky America's internal employee forum, normally filled with posts about scheduling and benefits, became a digital battleground. Dozens of current and former employees flooded the board with stories echoing Jason's passengers' move to economy for causing discomfort, special meals mysteriously going missing, and formal complaints being rerouted to Patricia's department only to vanish. One post from a former black flight attendant read, "I was told by a supervisor, 'First class isn't for everyone.' When I asked what that meant, he said, 'Don't overthink it.' I knew then I had to quit." The media caught on. Every major network requested interviews. Horizon Technologies servers were nearly overwhelmed by traffic to the Equal Skies Initiative website. News anchors debated the implications on air. Is this the tipping point for air travel reform? Are other airlines hiding similar patterns? Can Marcus Daniels succeed where institutions have failed? Marcus didn't speak publicly yet. Instead, he watched, waited, planned. The next strike came from the legal world. Diana Washington and her team filed an official inquiry with the Department of Transportation and the Federal Aviation Administration requesting an investigation into racial bias within Sky America's customer service practices. Attached were over 100 complaints submitted via Equal Skies in just 3 days. Cross-referenced and categorized by race, age, gender, and flight route. But the most damning blow was yet to come. Late that evening, Tariq entered the war room holding a printed document. "Marcus," he said, "this just leaked." He laid it on the table. A confidential internal memo from Sky America's Risk Management Division dated 3 weeks before the assault. It read in part, high-risk passengers defined as those with DEI affiliations. Media visibility or corporate leadership roles should be handled with increased caution. Incidents involving such individuals may escalate to reputational threats. Crew should be discreet but firm in asserting authority early. Marcus stared at the page. He didn't speak for a full minute. Then he turned to Diana. "This is profiling." "Worse," she replied. "It's weaponized procedure." That night, they uploaded the memo redacted for security, but authenticated alongside a public statement titled, "When Procedure Becomes Prejudice, The Hidden Culture of Bias in American Skies." It went viral within hours. But the twist came the following morning. At a press conference scheduled by Sky America to address the scandal, Richard Blackwell stepped to the podium, flanked by 2 unexpected guests, Marcus Daniels and Amara Williams. The media gasped. Flashbulbs exploded. Blackwell cleared his throat. "For years, our industry has operated with blind spots, dangerous ones. As CEO, I take full responsibility for what occurred on Flight 2187 and for the system that allowed it. I am not here to deflect. I am here to transform." Then, turning to Marcus, "We will implement every measure the Equal Skies Initiative demands, and we will begin immediately." Today, I also announce a $25 million partnership with Equal Skies to develop training policy and accountability standards for every crew member and executive in our company. Reporters screamed questions, but he raised a hand. "This is not charity. This is course correction." Marcus stepped to the mic, voice still hoarse but resonant. "Let this be clear. This is not about one airline. This is about every institution that normalizes exclusion under the guise of policy. I didn't ask to be a symbol, but if that's what it takes, I'll carry that weight." Amara's voice followed. "If you've ever been made to feel small in a space you earned, you're not alone. We're documenting every story. Because when the system forgets your humanity, the only remedy is to force it to remember." In the crowd, journalists nodded. Activists stood. Even some Sky America employees wept. Marcus stepped back, and for the first time in this entire ordeal, he smiled not from victory, but from the knowledge that the first wall had fallen. The system had cracked, and now the whole world could see what was inside. 3 days after the press conference, Marcus Daniels stood on the rooftop terrace of Horizon Technologies' Atlanta headquarters. The sun hadn't fully risen, but the sky was already glowing with the pale orange of a morning that didn't ask permission to begin. Below him, the city buzzed to life. Planes drifted silently in the distance, metal birds across a canvas of dawn. Once he had feared the sight of them. Not because of flying, but because of what awaited him on board. Now he saw something different opportunity. Inside the building, his team was working around the clock. Equal Skies had transformed overnight. What began as a temporary response platform was now a full-scale organization complete with divisions in legal advocacy, public policy, data analytics, and media outreach. They'd received over 13,000 documented cases of racial discrimination during air travel from passengers in 41 states and 17 countries. Patterns emerged, startlingly clear ones. Higher likelihood of escalation for passengers with non-Western surnames, longer wait times for service. Random searches on return flights from Africa and Southeast Asia. Requests for upgrades denied without explanation. But now they had more than patterns. They had infrastructure. Marcus walked inside, nodding to his staff, many of whom had been recruited in the last 72 hours. Lawyers, tech developers, civil rights historians, airline consultants. Some were white, some black, some Latino. All of them were driven by the same fire to tear down the polite, polished scaffolding of institutional bias and rebuild something better. He entered the war room. A giant screen displayed metrics engagement spikes, policy drafts in progress, open cases, scheduled interviews. Tariq pointed to the largest chart on the board. "Look at this," he said. 4 more airlines reached out since yesterday. Alaska Air, VistaJet, even Aerotrans, the European carrier. They want in. In on what Marcus asked. On transformation, Tariq said. Not PR spin. They're scared, yes, but some of them genuinely want to fix it. Across the room, Diana stood at a conference table surrounded by stacks of files. "We've finalized Equal Skies certification protocol," she announced. "Airlines that want to partner must agree to a 36-month audit, independent evaluators, data transparency, public-facing results." "And the incentive?" Marcus asked. She grinned. "We've linked it to institutional investors. 3 major firms say they'll begin requiring Equal Skies certification before investing in airline stocks." Marcus let out a low whistle. Now that is leverage. It was more than a movement now. It was a market force. He moved to a side table where Amara was typing furiously. Her followers had ballooned from 200,000 to over 4 million. But she hadn't monetized the story. Instead, she used her voice to build a storytelling arm for Equal Skies gathering and elevating personal accounts of injustice that were too often swept aside. "I've started profiling former employees," she said. "People like Jason, and flight attendants of color who quit after years of silent discrimination. Their voices are changing the tone of this conversation." Marcus nodded. "People trust stories before they trust data." "Exactly," Amara replied. "The story is the data." At 2:00 p.m., Marcus convened a leadership call. Representatives from NAACP, ACLU, and the Department of Transportation joined via video link. The goal draft national legislation to require anti-bias auditing across all transportation sectors, not just airlines. The proposal was ambitious, but the timing was perfect. For the first time in years, bipartisan attention had shifted to civil rights in the corporate space, not from court cases, but from viral accountability. Cameras, algorithms, survivors turned organizers. Mid-meeting, Marcus's phone buzzed. He almost ignored it until he saw the name, Richard Blackwell. He stepped away to answer. "I assume you've seen the news," Blackwell said. "I'm stepping down as CEO, effective next quarter." Marcus paused. "Why? Because leadership means knowing when you've lost the right to lead," Blackwell said. "I failed to see the culture I helped create. I let metrics blind me to humanity. You showed me that, whether you intended to or not." There was a pause. "I've asked the board to consider Lydia Montgomery as my replacement," he added. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Your head of strategy?" "Yes, and the first black woman who would lead a U.S. legacy carrier if they approve it." Marcus exhaled. Slowly, a new generation rising from the very seat of the old guard. "Good luck," Marcus said. Blackwell chuckled softly. "I'll need it. You've redefined the playing field." He hung up. Marcus returned to the conference room, but before he re-entered, he looked at the hallway wall. It bore a quote he had engraved the day Horizon Technologies moved into this building. "You can't fix what you won't face." And now they were facing it. Not just as a company, as an industry, a culture, a country. Then came the twist, quiet, but thunderous. His assistant rushed in, eyes wide. "Sir, it's trending. What is—" She turned the screen toward him. First class reckoning. Equal skies now. Boardroom to boarding gate. Top of every platform. America wasn't just watching. It was ready to change. Within a week of the press conference and Sky America's public capitulation, the dominoes began to fall quickly, visibly, and far beyond the confines of the airline industry. First, it was the investors. Several large institutional firms, including Warren Group Capital and Brookdale Asset Management, publicly announced that they were placing Sky America on a watch list, not for financial underperformance, but for social governance failure. Their official statements included phrases like risk to brand reputation, unacceptable exposure to litigation, and evidence of culture misalignment. Sky America stock fell another 8%. Then came the media storm. Legacy outlets like the New York Times and the Washington Post ran in-depth features titled "The Flight That Changed Corporate America" and "When First Class Turned into Ground Zero." Interviews with Marcus Daniels, Amara Williams, Jason the flight attendant, and even passengers from Flight 2187 flooded airwaves. More shocking still, a leaked clip of a private Sky America board meeting surfaced its audio, exposing executives expressing fear not over what happened, but over how fast the public turned. The backlash was immediate. Social media took no prisoners. Employees from other industries, hotels, rideshare companies, banks, tech firms began using the hashtag #IWasFlight2187, sharing stories of racial profiling and service denial. Some were executives in suits, others students, nurses, pastors, veterans. Marcus watched this unfold not with satisfaction, but solemn resolve. This isn't about breaking a company, he told his team. It's about forcing a system to admit what it's designed to hide. Diana Washington, sitting beside him, nodded. And it's working. The Equal Skies inbox passed 30,000 entries yesterday. We're seeing patterns across every major airline. Same language, same escalation behaviors, same lack of accountability. A full team of data scientists at Horizon began analyzing the submissions. Within days, they produced a predictive bias algorithm that could calculate a flight route's likelihood of discriminatory service based on historical reports. They called it Fairline. Airlines didn't know what to do with it. Consumers knew exactly what to do. They demanded to see the score before booking. Tariq launched a public dashboard. Jetrite, a smaller airline that had proactively reached out to partner with Equal Skies, became the first carrier in the U.S. to publish their bias scores in real time. Bookings on their routes spiked 19% overnight. Meanwhile, Marcus received a call he hadn't expected from the Department of Transportation, the secretary herself. "Mr. Daniels, we're following the Equal Skies movement closely," she said. "Frankly, your team's data is more detailed than ours. We want to talk about integrating your reporting standards into a federal model." Marcus didn't answer immediately, because this wasn't just consequence, it was conversion. Institutions weren't just breaking, they were beginning to restructure themselves around the new gravity. In a closed-door meeting with the DOT, Equal Skies proposed a 5-point Plan 1, a national bias reporting portal for air and rail passengers. 2. Real-time access to airline service data for consumer watchdogs. 3. Independent audit requirements for any airline receiving federal subsidies. 4. Funding for whistleblower protection in transportation industries. 5. Legislative language that ties executive compensation to verified improvements in service equity. The secretary listened carefully, then said the quiet part aloud. "We've needed something like this for decades, but it took a public reckoning to make it politically viable. Outside the government walls, pressure built in other forms. On cable news, anchors debated not whether Marcus was right, but whether the Equal Skies movement marked the start of a third-wave civil rights movement, one focused on commercial dignity, algorithmic accountability, and corporate ethics. Schools invited Marcus to speak. Business schools asked for curriculum licenses, Documentaries were pitched. HBO made contact. Marcus turned most of them down. He wasn't chasing fame. He was rebuilding a foundation. Then came the twist. An email from the Office of the President. Subject equity and access in transportation, National Town Hall invite. The message read, Mr. Daniels, on behalf of the President of the United States, we are requesting your participation as keynote speaker at an upcoming White House town hall. This event will center on systemic inequity in national transportation systems. Your leadership on this matter is both timely and essential. With respect, Office of Policy and Public Engagement. The White House Marcus set the phone down slowly. Diana saw his hands tremble slightly. It's happening, she whispered. He didn't respond, but in his silence was a storm. From a drink denied to the doors of the West Wing, from being choked to being chosen to speak. The world wasn't just watching Marcus anymore. It was rebuilding itself around what he represented. The marble floors of the White House's East Wing echoed beneath Marcus Daniels' footsteps as he approached the double doors of the Roosevelt Room. The historic chamber had hosted titans of industry war generals and civil rights icons. Now it would host him a man who once had to beg for water at 35,000 feet. Inside rows of polished wood chairs were arranged with surgical precision. To his left, transportation executives, union representatives, and federal regulators. To his right, civil rights leaders, social scientists, and the Equal Skies delegation. At the head of the table sat the Secretary of Transportation. An empty chair was reserved next to her. For Marcus, he took his seat. The room fell into silence, not out of politeness, but respect. The secretary leaned into her mic. Ladies and gentlemen, this session is now in order. And before we begin, I'd like to yield the floor to Mr. Marcus Daniels, founder of Horizon Technologies, architect of the Equal Skies Initiative, and the man whose integrity has made this moment possible. No applause, just reverent silence as Marcus stood, adjusted the lapel of his navy suit, and spoke. Thank you, Madam Secretary, he began. I won't take this time to revisit what happened on Flight 2187. You already know. America knows. What matters now is that it wasn't a failure of one airline. It was the exposure of a system that protects the comfortable and punishes the visible. He looked around the room, eyes steady. I was profiled, ignored, accused, and assaulted. Not because of who I am, but because of what I represent. A contradiction. A black man in a seat the world assumes he didn't earn. Murmurs swept the table. Marcus continued, and when I demanded nothing more than equal treatment, I was almost choked for my silence. And then, finally, for my voice. He paused, but today is not about pain. It's about structure, about ownership, about rewriting the rules so that silence is no longer survival. He sat. The room stayed still for a beat too long. Then the secretary spoke. Thank you, Mr. Daniels. We're entering a new era of enforcement, and your leadership will help shape its architecture. That was the first reversal. The next came swiftly. Sky America's former CEO, Richard Blackwell, now retired, sat in the rear as an invited observer. Midway through the session, the secretary called on him by name. Mr. Blackwell, do you have anything to offer before we proceed to legislative discussions? He stood older, but somehow smaller than he had appeared in boardrooms. I do, he said. I built systems that prioritized order over fairness. I dismissed complaints that were messy, difficult, or reputationally inconvenient. And I stayed quiet when my employees protected each other instead of the customer. He turned to Marcus. You gave me a chance to step aside with dignity. But let me be clear, I didn't deserve it. Gasps rippled softly. He added, if this country wants change, it won't come from apology. It'll come from reallocation of power, of resources, of narrative. Then he stepped back. That afternoon, Equal Skies' full federal partnership was ratified by a unanimous task force vote. But the most striking reversal came later that evening, when the Equal Skies national standards were broadcast live from the White House lawn. Marcus was the final speaker. Cameras from every major outlet captured his remarks. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't preach. He simply listed the names of those whose voices had been ignored. Passengers forcibly removed, employees who resigned in protest, mothers who filed complaints that went nowhere, sons who were never believed. And finally, Heather Richardson, Patricia Green. You didn't just fail me. You failed a profession built on care, on presence, on humanity. But I won't campaign for your punishment. That's not my role. He looked directly into the camera. My role is to make sure that what you represented can no longer survive inside a system that's been made to evolve. The next morning, both Heather and Patricia issued statements through legal counsel. Heather admitted to bias-fueled decision-making under stress. Patricia confessed to neglecting oversight responsibilities that enabled persistent mistreatment. But the twist came hours later. Sky America announced that it would reverse engineer every customer service policy implemented in the last 15 years, starting with the removal of discretion-based privileges that had shielded biased staff behavior. The board further committed to quarterly third-party reports posted publicly. That afternoon, 3 more airlines preemptively adopted the Equal Skies framework. And then, without warning, JetWorld International, a global competitor based in Dubai, released a commercial featuring Marcus Daniels, his image-sharp voice still raspy. In the ad, he didn't speak about his trauma. He asked a single question. If a seat in first class still comes with second-class treatment, what's it really worth? The video closed with a simple screen, "Welcome to JetWorld," where you are never mistaken for less. And just like that, the power shifted for good. Not in a courtroom, not in a corporate memo, but in the hearts of every passenger who watched and whispered. He turned it around. The day Lydia Montgomery took the CEO seat at Sky America, the airline's headquarters in Chicago was under siege, not from protesters, but from progress. Cameras lined the marble lobby. Reporters filled the plaza, microphones ready. Inside the 32nd floor boardroom, the air was thick, not with fear, but with expectation. Lydia, formerly head of corporate strategy, was a soft-spoken, data-obsessed executive who preferred quarterly reports to podiums. But today, she stood before the company's executive team as the first black woman to lead a U.S. legacy carrier. "This is not a rebrand," she said. "This is a reckoning." She didn't smile. She didn't pitch. She read line by line from the Equal Skies Partnership Agreement. Every word, every clause, mandatory anti-bias training, transparent customer treatment metrics, executive bonuses tied to service equity, a standing advisory role for the Equal Skies initiative in all board-level policy decisions. When she finished, the room was silent. Then someone clapped. Then another. And then the entire room rose to its feet, not for her appointment, but for her clarity. Downstairs, Marcus Daniels watched the live stream from his hotel suite. He hadn't sought Lydia's promotion. He didn't even know her well. But her first act as CEO proved one thing she understood the moment better than any legacy executive could. She wasn't stepping into power to preserve the past. She was walking in to burn the manual that protected it. That same afternoon, Marcus joined a digital town hall, broadcast by Equal Skies across 22 airports and 14 airlines. Seated beside him were Amara Williams, Jason the flight attendant, and Tariq Johnson. The moderator turned to Marcus. "What does leadership look like after disruption?" He answered without hesitation. "It looks like courage without costume," he said. "Leadership isn't about managing fallout. It's about choosing friction when comfort would be easier." He turned to Jason. "Leadership is when a young employee risks his job to speak the truth." To Amara, "When a passenger films what others pretend not to see and doesn't sell the story, but gives it away." And finally, he looked directly into the camera. "Leadership," he said, "is no longer defined by who sits in the boardroom. It's who the boardroom must now listen to." The video went viral before the hour ended, but Equal Skies wasn't stopping. 2 days later, they launched the Leadership Reform Index, a public database scoring airline and hospitality companies based on boardroom diversity, equity-linked compensation structures, public response to discrimination claims, active civil rights partnerships, whistleblower protection policies. The top scorers were not legacy brands. They were startups, minority-owned carriers, and international airlines that had moved swiftly in response to Marcus's model. Sky America sat in the middle, not yet redeemed, but no longer in freefall. Lydia took that personally. In her first official act, she initiated a board reshuffling, removing 2 executives tied to prior complaint suppression and appointing 3 new directors. 1. Amara Williams, now Director of Customer Equity and Storytelling. 2. Jason Moore, promoted to lead crew ethics training. 3. Professor Michael Chen, a legal scholar and early witness, tapped as a compliance advisor. Marcus watched the appointments stream in with quiet awe. This wasn't tokenism. This was reconstruction. The press reached out for comment. His team declined most interviews. Marcus issued only one written statement. True leadership is not about rising above a broken system. It's about entering it and refusing to leave until it's transformed. Back at Horizon Technologies, his own company had undergone a quiet evolution. Recruitment, promotion, and retention data had been restructured to eliminate every hidden bias Osiris could detect. AI hiring software had been rebuilt from scratch, with human bias auditors shadowing every output. Diana Washington now led a new division, Ethical Systems Engineering. And Fairline Horizon's Predictive Bias Index had been licensed to 13 travel companies, 7 hotel chains, and 4 global airline groups within a single quarter. Marcus wasn't just witnessing new leadership rise, he was multiplying it. Then came the twist. That evening, as Marcus reviewed his calendar, his assistant entered holding a sealed envelope. "It was hand-delivered," she said. "No sender." He opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Mr. Daniels, you once told me leadership isn't about vengeance. Thank you for showing me what it is about. R." Blackwell attached was a check not to Marcus, but to the Equal Skies Foundation. 7 figures, no publicity, no conditions. Marcus placed the envelope down slowly. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He simply said, "File this under consequences, turn to conviction." Because that's what new leadership looked like. Not the perfect replacing the flawed, but the accountable rising from the humbled. The first sign that the world was shifting came not from a headline or a lawsuit, but from an internal memo leaked out of Continental Air, the nation's 3rd largest carrier. It wasn't written in legalese. It didn't contain buzzwords. It said simply, "We're next. If we don't change before Equal Skies knocks, we'll have to rebuild after they burn us down." The language was brutal, but it was honest. And honesty, real institutional honesty, had become the rarest commodity in American air travel. At Equal Skies headquarters in Atlanta, the reform requests rolled in like waves. Some were desperate. Some were sincere. Some were designed to stall. Marcus Daniels had seen enough boardrooms to tell the difference. By week 2, post-appointment, 5 major airlines had requested strategic reform audits. By week 3, over a dozen. Every airline wanted the same thing to fix the problem before their customers, employees, or investors forced their hand. But Equal Skies wasn't a PR agency. It was an operating system for justice. Marcus convened the Leadership Council. "We can't certify transformation unless it touches every level," he said, standing before a floor-to-ceiling monitor pulsing with data. Flight crew, gate agents, lounge staff, executive tier. If a company wants our badge, they rebuild every rung of the ladder, not just the one the cameras catch. Diana Washington nodded. And we set the rules. They did. The Equal Skies Institutional Reform Model, ERM, launched publicly within 30 days. It was structured like a federal compliance system. Clear benchmarks, annual audits, real-world penalties for failure. Every participant had to agree to independent tracking of discrimination complaints across all departments, anonymous employee feedback pipelines published quarterly, tie-in of executive pay to inclusivity KPIs, internal diversity councils with veto power on policy changes. Collaboration with a rotating panel of civil rights organizations to review and shape training materials. The airlines called it aggressive. Marcus called it entry-level decency. But here's what shocked: the public airlines started complying. Why? Because passengers were choosing with their wallets. Travelers began using Equal Skies app to filter bookings by transparency score. Airlines without scores or with failing grades saw their revenue dip nearly 14% in one quarter. For the first time, equity wasn't just a talking point. It was a business model. Continental Air made the first public announcement. They would submit to full Equal Skies certification. In exchange, Marcus and his team would work directly with their executive suite for 6 months to oversee reforms. It was unprecedented. Never before had a civil rights accountability firm embedded inside a multi-billion-dollar transportation company's strategic core. But Marcus didn't blink. He packed his bags, boarded a red-eye, and flew to their headquarters. This time, the drink came on time. This time, no one questioned his presence in Seat 1A. This time, the CEO was at the gate to meet him. And that was just the beginning. Soon after, JetRite, the startup regional carrier, became the first fully certified airline earning the highest possible score in every category. Their bookings surged. The FAA released a statement acknowledging that the Equal Skies framework would inform its future equity audits. Universities began adding Equal Skies standards into hospitality and aviation management programs. And the impact spilled far beyond U.S. borders. Air Kenya, Sky Nordic, Emirates, Qantas. International carriers reached out seeking to understand what Marcus had built and how to license it across global markets. Equal Skies responded by opening its first satellite office in London and a second in Nairobi. Partnerships were inked with the European Union's Passenger Rights Commission. Institutional reform was no longer a negotiation. It was a new normal. Then came the twist. Marcus received an encrypted message from an anonymous whistleblower inside an airline tech vendor, a company responsible for passenger profiling algorithms used across 70% of carriers worldwide. The subject line: proof of racial flagging triggers in boarding software. Confidential. Urgent. He opened the file. Inside was a schematic showing how certain last names, passport origins, and seat class combinations were silently flagged by AI, leading to increased secondary screenings, random gate reassignments, or surveillance escalations. The code was subtle. The effect systemic. Marcus stood, breathing heavily. This wasn't about frontline bias anymore. This was coded discrimination at the infrastructure level. He summoned the Equal Skies Data Science Division. Within 48 hours, they had proof replicated, the algorithm tested, it confirmed the trigger patterns. The discovery made headlines around the world. Equal Skies uncovers hidden algorithm that profiles passengers by race. And just like that, a new phase of reform began, not just of people, but of machines programmed to carry human prejudice. Marcus Daniels had started by confronting flight attendants. He was now rewriting the DNA of the industry. It started with a TikTok. A college student named Kelsey Martinez, who had never met Marcus Daniels, posted a 60-second video comparing her mother's treatment during a recent flight to the policies exposed by Equal Skies. She asked for an aisle seat, Kelsey said, holding back tears. She was told the system couldn't accommodate requests. The woman behind her got moved up for convenience. You can guess the difference between them. The video hit 10 million views in 48 hours, but it wasn't the views that mattered. It was the comments. Thousands of stories spilled out like floodgates bursting open. My dad was told to watch his tone for asking for headphones. I was accused of stealing a blanket. They accidentally skipped my meal twice on a 13-hour flight. A cultural pattern that had long been whispered about was now being shouted, and it didn't take a celebrity endorsement or a news broadcast to validate it. It took people recognizing their own truth in someone else's. The I was flight 2187 hashtag trended again, this time organically globally. From South Africa to South Korea, passengers, employees, and former flight crew shared encounters of unequal treatment. some subtle, some explosive, all undeniable. The Equal Skies website nearly crashed. They expanded server capacity overnight and added a new feature: My Flight, My Story. A secure form where people could upload video, audio, or written accounts of travel-related discrimination. In less than a week, 72,000 entries poured in. Marcus Daniels watched it unfold from his office at Horizon Eyes, wide not with surprise, but with gravity. This was bigger than policy now, bigger than protocol. It was public reckoning, and it was contagious. Other industries felt the aftershocks. Hotel chains were the first to panic. In a viral thread, a Black couple from Georgia documented how they were asked for a $200 damage deposit at check-in, a fee no one else in line had to pay. Screenshots, receipts, a side-by-side comparison. They tagged Equal Skies. The post reached 8 million impressions by morning. The hotel brand issued an apology. Too late. Marcus and his team responded by drafting Equal Stays, a sister initiative that would audit lodging and hospitality services using the same framework of anonymous complaint aggregation, transparency metrics, and certified accountability partnerships. It wasn't even fully launched, and 5 major chains contacted Equal Skies requesting onboarding. Then came the transportation sector, rideshare companies, train services, even cruise lines. All suddenly aware that ignoring this movement no longer protected them. It endangered them. Public momentum wasn't just on Marcus's side now. It was carrying him forward like a wave. Media outlets ran panel discussions titled, "Has Marcus Daniels Sparked a Civil Rights 3.0?" and "From Seat 2A to Structural Change, How Travel Became the New Front Line." But Marcus stayed silent until the White House called again. This time, not for a town hall, for a primetime televised address. "We'd like you to deliver a national update." The message read on how the federal government, the airline industry, and public partners are responding to the Equal Skies revelations. "We believe America is ready to hear from you." Marcus hesitated. He wasn't a politician. He was a technologist, a founder, a man who had once sat quietly while water was spilled on his laptop and hate whispered in his ear. But now he was something else. He was a voice people trusted more than institutions. He agreed. The address aired on every major network streaming platform and social media feed. Marcus stood behind a modest lectern throat, still raspy from months of overuse. The Equal Skies pin gleamed on his lapel. "I didn't ask to lead a movement," he began, "but I was given no other choice." He recounted the humiliation, the attack, the viral footage. But then he shifted. "What matters now is what we do with the evidence. The airlines aren't the enemy. Neither are hotels or trains or any space where service becomes a mirror of our bias. The enemy is the system we refuse to question." He held up a printed copy of the Equal Skies Accountability Charter. This is not a demand. It's an invitation to every CEO, mayor, policymaker, manager, and citizen. Join us. Make equity measurable. Make it enforceable. Make it permanent. The speech ended not with applause, but with a call to action, and that was the twist. Overnight, more than 2,000 companies downloaded the Equal Skies Charter. University student governments passed resolutions adopting the framework on their campuses. 3 U.S. governors pledged to fund state-level versions of the program. For the first time in decades, civil rights wasn't just a legal mandate. It was a social movement powered by data stories and the people themselves. Marcus looked out the window later that night and saw the glow of plane lights dotting the sky. And for the first time since Seat 2A, he smiled not because the fight was over, but because the country had finally joined it. When Marcus Daniels delivered his national address, the ripple wasn't subtle. It was seismic. The morning after, an executive at a luxury hotel chain was asked to step down, caught in a viral clip mocking new bias compliance policies implemented under Equal Stays. A transportation startup lost a major funding round after an investor group found it had no formal equity training or transparency channels. But these weren't isolated responses. They were aftershocks echoes of a structural collapse rippling through the walls of industries that had long relied on etiquette to cover exclusion and silence to cushion injustice. Equal skies had changed the conversation. Now it was changing the expectations. Boardrooms scrambled to adapt. Insurance companies reevaluated client policies based on equity liability risk. HR tech vendors were suddenly asked if their applicant tracking systems had bias auditing mechanisms. Universities started requesting guest lectures from Equal Skies officials on ethical design service equity and racialized decision logic in algorithmic processes. Equal Skies itself grew exponentially. From a compact crisis response unit, it had become a multinational standards body with 4 divisions: Air, Land, Hospitality, and Systems. Offices opened in Toronto, Sao Paulo, Amsterdam, and Johannesburg. Their new slogan wasn't just a statement, it was a warning. If service discriminates, we'll be there next. Marcus didn't want a global empire, but he understood something others hadn't. Once equity becomes measurable, it becomes demandable. And once it's demandable, it becomes non-negotiable. Industry analysts called it the Marcus effect. Public-facing industries, especially ones reliant on customer experience, began restructuring. Airlines implemented bias detection sensors into employee evaluation software. Hotels created anonymous guest feedback apps with direct reporting to oversight panels. Transit systems began replacing subjective security screening with evidence-based protocols. And it wasn't just optics, it was economics. A Harvard Business Review article titled "Justice as a KPI" outlined how companies aligned with Equal Skies had experienced a 22% increase in consumer trust ratings, employee retention, and quarterly satisfaction surveys. Wall Street took notice. Firms began integrating Equal Skies certification into ESG environmental social governance portfolios. Bias-resilient companies became a new investment class hedged against reputational catastrophe. But not everyone cheered. Some CEOs grumbled in closed rooms. Some unions resisted, claiming the new standards were a threat to seniority systems. A prominent executive at a legacy airline went viral for saying, "If we change everything based on one incident, we'll lose tradition." Marcus read the quote aloud in a leadership roundtable, then calmly replied, "Tradition should never cost someone their dignity." That soundbite became a headline, and a t-shirt, and a slogan painted across student centers, company walls, and travel posters worldwide. Still, not all industries moved easily. In one tense meeting, Marcus met with the chief compliance officer of a luxury European cruise line, reluctant to adopt Equal Skies protocols. The officer leaned across the table and said, "We've never had these problems." Maybe because our customers know how to behave. Marcus didn't respond immediately. Then he reached into his briefcase, pulled out a printed report, and slid it across the table. It contained 342 documented cases of service-related bias aboard the company's ships, each linked to name date, staff ID, and port. Most had never been escalated because the victims didn't speak the language or felt powerless to report. Marcus pointed to the final line on the report: 3 incidents per month. No internal accountability. No systemic review. He looked the man in the eye. "Maybe they behaved," Marcus said. "Maybe you didn't." The officer folded the report. "You'll have our signature by tomorrow." It was a quiet victory, but symbolic, because this was no longer about one company or country. This was about an entire world waking up to how civility had been weaponized against equity. Jason, now heading Equal Skies Crew Relations, developed a training module called Invisible Incidents, teaching staff how to recognize and disrupt normalized patterns of disrespect. It rolled out to 3 major airlines, 2 rail services, and over 6,000 employees in its first month. Amara launched Narrative Nights, a live stream series that invited survivors to tell their stories with dignity, not pity. One episode featured an elderly couple who hadn't flown in 20 years because of how they were treated during their honeymoon. They cried on camera. So did the viewers. But the twist came during an industry summit. Marcus was invited to deliver a keynote at the Global Service and Ethics Forum in Geneva. As he approached the stage, he passed a group of executives murmuring about how uncomfortable the new environment was. "Used to be you could trust your instincts," one said. "Now every decision could cost you your job." Marcus stood at the podium, smiled, and began. "If your instincts are afraid of accountability, maybe it's not the world that needs to change, maybe it's you." The room went silent, then stood, because the echo wasn't fading. It was becoming the voice of the future. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning when Marcus Daniels received the encrypted file that would become the final fracture point. The sender anonymous, the subject line. "You missed one." Inside was a cache of internal communications. Thousands of messages exchanged over several years between executives, policy designers, and tech contractors for a shadowy aviation consulting firm called Astraspan. The company wasn't well known. It specialized in compliance systems, behavioral analytics, and airport operations optimization. What the file revealed was staggering. Astraspan had built behavioral scoring software for multiple global airlines. Under the guise of passenger safety profiling, they had created a color-coded index system covertly assigning risk levels based on factors like name origin, accent detection, frequency of service requests, clothing classification, hoodies, headscarves, gold chains, physical posture in line. Passengers flagged in red or orange were silently routed for increased observation, longer security screening, or random service denial documented as behavioral containment protocol. And the kicker, Sky America had used the system for 6 years. Even after Richard Blackwell's resignation, no one had acknowledged its existence. Not until now. Marcus called an emergency session with Diana, Jason, Amara, and Tariq. "This isn't just human bias," he said, scrolling through the messages. "It's machine bias built and deployed intentionally." Diana skimmed the files. They knew. Every airline that used this knew what it was doing. Jason looked sick. "We blamed Heather. Patricia? But this is institutional by design." Tariq's voice was cold. "We need to blow this open." Amara was already editing a short explainer for the Equal Skies digital feed. Marcus stared at the final page of the report. There, in black and white, was a list of suppressive criteria traits the algorithm was trained to flag as disruption risk. Passenger speaks in AV, African American vernacular, English. Passenger carries religious beads or prayer items. Passenger insists on correct name pronunciation. Passenger records. Crew interactions. Marcus whispered. They coded dignity as a threat. The team moved fast. Equal Skies compiled the report into a document titled "Flagged and Forgotten: How Airlines Engineered Bias into Their Code." Before publishing it, they reached out to journalists, lawmakers, and civil rights leaders. Within 12 hours, it was everywhere. CNN, The Guardian, The New York Times, NPR, ProPublica. The exposé broke records. Cable news hosts read excerpts on air. Newspapers printed the list of flagged behaviors in full. Civil liberties attorneys filed lawsuits in 4 states the same day. Passengers who had experienced random screenings and unexplained service denial now had a name for it. Astraspan. The fallout was immediate. Sky America's interim board issued a statement condemning the use of the system, but internal documents confirmed they had renewed the contract twice after receiving complaints. The Department of Transportation opened a federal investigation. 2 senators called for a congressional hearing. By sunset, Astraspan's website had been taken offline. Their offices raided. Their executives subpoenaed. Marcus had never planned to burn it all down. But as he stood in front of a crowd of reporters the next day, holding the now public Astraspan index in his hand, he didn't flinch. "This isn't about algorithms," he said. "It's about choices. Human choices cloaked in code that told entire groups of people, you are not trusted. You are not welcome. You are not safe." He paused. No more. That moment became the final exposure. The crowd erupted with questions. What now? What next? Marcus replied with clarity. Equal Skies will create the world's first certified ethical passenger technology framework, open source globally, auditable and accountable to the public. We will partner with engineers, civil rights scholars, and regulators to ensure the tools that serve us do not sort us. The proposal gained instant traction. Civil rights organizations across 3 continents pledged support. Tech companies previously criticized for bias in facial recognition joined to collaborate. Even the United Nations Human Rights Council reached out. But the twist came when one of Astrospan's own engineers, now a whistleblower, spoke to the press. Her name was Layla Naeem. "I helped build it," she said in a televised interview. "We were told it was for safety. Then they showed us what safety looked like people who didn't look like their majority passengers. We objected. We were ignored. So I left. But I saved everything." She turned to camera. "I'm sorry, and I'm ready to help fix what we broke." The public wept, not just for the victims, but for the truth they'd always suspected and now finally proven. Marcus stood beside Layla days later at a press conference. She handed him a drive. "This contains the final pieces," she said. "The original logic, the code behind the bias." Marcus accepted it with both hands, because the story that began with silence escalated with injustice and unfolded through defiance, had finally led to truth that could never again be buried. There was no standing ovation, no champagne toast, no final mic drop. When Marcus Daniels walked out of the Equal Skies Policy Summit that afternoon, he didn't even realize the cameras had stopped following him, and for once, he didn't care. The building, an unmarked federal annex on the edge of D.C., had just hosted the final ratification of the Ethical Passenger Technology Framework, a new international standard that would govern how biometric behavioral and service data were handled by transportation networks worldwide. It would be open source, transparent, enforceable. Written into the operating charters of 16 major airlines, 9 hotel groups, 4 train systems, and for the first time ever, a global cruise conglomerate. Marcus had chaired the final session. He'd said little. He didn't need to. His presence, quiet, bruised, and unrelenting, had become the standard. That night, back in Atlanta, he sat alone in the corner of a small jazz club he used to visit with his mother when Horizon was still just an idea scribbled on napkins. The band played a Coltrane classic. No one interrupted him. No one whispered his name. And that was the first victory. Across the country, airports were quieter too, not in sound, but in friction. Passengers of color reported being treated not as anomalies, but equals. Service became more consistent. Flight attendants now carried de-escalation cards clipped behind their ID badges, a direct recommendation from Equal Skies. Jason had trained over 25,000 crew members in 4 months. Amara's story archive had grown into a living museum of testimony, now displayed in rotating digital exhibits in airport terminals from LAX to Johannesburg. And Diana Shee had been appointed to lead a joint task force between the U.S. Department of Transportation and the EU Commission on Passenger Equity Enforcement. But the biggest change came quietly. And it wasn't a policy. It was a feeling. An invisible weight had lifted from the air above first-class cabins, security lines, hotel lobbies, and rental car counters. Not everywhere, not forever, but enough to notice, enough to breathe. Marcus felt it most when a stranger approached him, not with praise, but with understanding. A father at a coffee shop in Dallas. "Hey, Mr. Daniels," he said, "my daughter, 12 years old, told me she wants to be an airline CEO. Says she wants to make the rules fair like that Marcus guy. Thought you'd want to know." Marcus smiled. That was enough. He no longer measured impact in headlines or donations. He measured it in friction removed, moments restored, dignity returned. At Equal Skies headquarters, the team had begun phasing Marcus out of day-to-day leadership. Not because he was tired, but because he had built something that could outlast him. Tariq took over operations. Amara became Chief Communications Strategist. Jason was appointed Director of Crew Equity for the entire Aviation Alliance. Marcus quietly assumed the title of Chair Emeritus. He spent his mornings mentoring new founders in social impact tech, his afternoons writing essays, his evenings walking. One walk took him to the very airport where it had all begun. Gate C-14, the flight where Heather Richardson's fingers had once crushed his windpipe and dignity in equal measure. The airline had renamed the gate after a civil rights icon. Marcus didn't linger, but as he passed the gate, he noticed a bronze plaque beside it. No photos, no fanfare, just words. This is where the sky changed. In honor of those who refused to fly beneath the weight of silence, he stood still. A gate agent nearby recognized him not from the internet, but from something deeper. She didn't say a word. She just nodded. That was the second victory. Later that week, he received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Mr. Daniels, I was on that flight. I didn't speak up. I watched it happen. I filmed nothing. I said nothing. And I've thought about it every day since. I now work for Equal Skies. I'm learning to be braver. Thank you for giving me that chance. He folded the note and placed it in the drawer of his desk. Next to the Equal Skies charter. Next to his mother's tie pin. Next to a ticket stub for Flight 2187, kept not as a reminder of violence, but of victory without applause. Because in the end, Marcus Daniels didn't need revenge, or attention, or a statue. He only needed what had been taken from him so casually, the right to move through the world without explanation. And now that right belonged not just to him, but to millions. Because justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it wins quietly. 6 months after the Equal Skies framework was adopted into federal transportation law, Marcus Daniels stood at the edge of a campus green at his alma mater, the University of Michigan. The leaves were golden, the air crisp, and the lectern beside him bore a seal he never imagined would appear next to his name, Daniels Center for Justice-Informed Systems. A new institute, fully funded, fully independent, focused on embedding equity into technology policy and public design from the first line of code to the final mile of service. He didn't name it after himself. The board did. He argued. They refused. Today was the ribbon cutting. Students surrounded the open-air ceremony. Faculty activists, technologists, and airline executives sat shoulder to shoulder under the midday sun. It wasn't just a ceremony, it was a handoff. A moment to say, what we fought for is no longer just our burden. It's yours to carry now with better tools and fewer excuses. Marcus stepped to the mic. He wore no tie. The suit was navy, his posture unassuming. But his words carried the weight of a journey few would ever fully understand. When I sat in seat 2A that day, I wasn't thinking about legacy. I was thinking about air, about breath, about whether I'd live long enough to file a complaint that would get ignored like all the others. Laughter was sparse, but knowing. I didn't raise my voice that day. I didn't flip tables or make threats. I asked for sparkling water. He paused. I got strangled. Silence. But what they didn't know is I came from a place where people survive on the oxygen of memory, where we remember everything they try to make us forget, including who we are, what we've earned, and where we belong. He looked up at the students' faces full of potential and exhaustion, like all generations born into injustice and charged with fixing it. I'm not here today because I wanted to lead a movement. I'm here because I refuse to let my silence validate a system built to erase me. Applause now slow and real. He continued. Legacy isn't what people say about you when you're gone. It's the structures they're forced to navigate because you chose to build differently while you were still here. He stepped back. That was all. No long farewell. No self-congratulation. The moment didn't need a hero. It needed a builder. Later that day, Marcus visited the Equal Skies Atlanta office one last time. The space had grown. 2 floors now. Nearly 200 full-time employees. Policy teams, technology engineers, community advisors, case response officers. The newest wall held framed photos of milestone events. The press conference with Amara, Jason's first training session, the FAA's official endorsement, Layla Naeem holding the Astrospan code, the White House signing ceremony. But at the center of the wall, framed in steel, was a still shot of Marcus boarding Flight 2187, back straight, laptop bag in hand. A man walking into a space designed to reject him without ever lowering his gaze. The caption below read, "Let the sky remember who stood here." Marcus stared at the photo for a long time. Then Tariq entered the room, now wearing a tailored suit and Equal Skies badge. "She's waiting for you." "Who, your mother?" Marcus smiled. Elaine Daniels waited outside, seated on a bench beneath the Equal Skies logo etched into the concrete. She stood as he approached her scarf, wrapped tightly around her head eyes, as sharp as they were when she worked 3 jobs to raise him. "You still walking like you got something to prove?" She teased. Marcus chuckled. "Old habits. You don't owe this place anything," she said gently. "Not anymore." "I know," he replied, "but I gave it something instead." She looked proud and relieved, not because her son had won, but because her son had stayed whole. That night, Marcus received one final message before turning in. It was from a teenage girl in Oakland, sent through Equal Skies' general inbox, "Dear Mr. Daniels. I watched what happened. I watched the hearings, the interviews, the changes. They say it all started with you. But when I fly now, no one questions me. So maybe it ends with me. Thank you." He didn't reply. He just stared at the screen for a long time. Because that was legacy. Not the buildings, not the policies, but the possibility that one voice once denied water could ripple so far into the world that even a child could now soar through the sky uninterrupted. Airports used to make Marcus Daniels tense, not because of the lines or delays or turbulence, but because every gate, every flight was a question: will they see me today, or will they erase me again? Now, when Marcus stepped into an airport, he felt something different. Not pride, not power, but peace. It had been nearly 1 year since Flight 2187, 1 year since fingers dug into his throat, since silence screamed, since the system miscalculated who he was and who he would become. He stood in a quiet terminal now, watching a digital billboard cycle through rotating messages. All passengers deserve dignity. Certified Equal Skies Airline. Your story matters. Tell it. Share it. We're listening. The Equal Skies seal, once controversial, now adorned check-in counters, flight menus, even in-flight entertainment intros. Not as branding, but as accountability. A badge that said, "We've been examined and we're still evolving." He turned to board. Seat 2A again. But this time, the moment didn't carry trauma. It carried transformation. The flight attendant smiled, not a trained smile, but a human one. "Mr. Daniels, welcome back," she said softly. He nodded. And for the first time, that gesture was enough. Marcus leaned back into the leather seat, looked out the window as the tarmac faded into clouds, and thought about what had been rebuilt not just outside, but inside. He remembered the faces. Heather's rage, Patricia's silence, Jason's courage, Amara's camera, Dr. Wilson's authority, Layla's whistleblow, Diana's fire, Tariq's loyalty, Elaine's prayers, and the girl from Oakland. He hadn't written her back. He didn't need to, because she was right. It had started with him, but if the system really worked, it would end with her. A generation that wouldn't have to demand proof of their right to exist in privileged spaces. They would simply enter, unapologetically. Marcus opened a book on his lap. Not a biography, not legislation, but a memoir by a man who'd once marched through Selma. The inscription inside had been sent to him by the author's son. "Your sky became our ground. Now we build on it." He closed the book, let his eyes rest, and allowed himself to exhale completely. Because for the first time, he didn't need to brace for the descent. Below him, the world was changing. On solid ground, the Equal Skies Foundation had launched its 5th division focused entirely on education. They were building curriculum for schools on civil rights, literacy, systemic bias, and ethical technology. Pilot programs were being tested in over 120 districts. In boardrooms, KPIs included not just revenue and retention, but respect. In courtrooms, equal skies data had been cited in 3 major discrimination rulings. In communities, airports had become canvases of art tribute and shared ownership. Marcus had stepped away from daily operations, not because the work was finished, but because it was no longer fragile. He was no longer needed to protect it, only to remind the world why it had to exist. At a private dinner weeks later, a reporter asked him, "If you could rewrite that moment on the flight before the camera, before the violence, what would you do differently?" Marcus answered with no hesitation. "I'd ask for the water again," he said. "But this time, I'd make sure everyone else got theirs too. Because that was the point. It was never about vengeance. It was never about going viral. It was about equity, empathy, ethics at altitude." He left the dinner early that night, took the long way home, rolled down the window, let the wind hit his face like breath long held, like voice long buried, like justice finally exhaled. Back in his apartment, he passed a shelf of reminders: the worn tie pin, the flight ticket, the letter from the girl, the Equal Skies Charter now signed by 27 nations, and next to it all, a framed quote from his mother: "You don't fix the sky by shouting at the clouds. You do it by lifting others until they can breathe up there too." He smiled, because now they could. And maybe that was the real legacy, not what Marcus had built, but what he had left open: a runway, a roadmap, a reason. So when the next Marcus sat in seat 2A, he wouldn't need armor. He'd need only his name, and that would be enough. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch more gripping stories like this. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.